Earlier this year, in an interview on BBC Radio 5 Live, while taking questions from listeners, Keir Starmer made what he called an old-fashioned mistake when he said that Labour would not renew the 25% tax-free lump sum that people can currently withdraw from their pensions once they reach the age they're able to take it from their private pensions. He said, well, it runs out in a couple of years and we're not going to renew it because we have to ensure that every single thing that we put into our manifesto is fully costed and funded. Now, of course, this caused a lot of confusion and panic, and my heart dropped because that tax-free lump sum is a huge part of my pension plans to retire early. It's a big part of my strategy. I mean, I don't know about you, but getting that 25% tax-free lump sum almost feels like a given right after working so hard to get it in the first place. The idea that I can go off and buy a holiday home or the car I've always been too tight to splash out on, or use it to help my kids, is huge. I mean, realistically, I'd use it over time to reduce my tax payable, as it's generally the better strategy, but still, it's up to me what I want to do with that money. The thought of it being taken away is pretty shocking. Since then, the Labour leader's office cleared this up and they said that the ability to withdraw 25% of your pension as a tax-free lump sum is a permanent feature of the tax system, and Labour is not planning to change this. To be fair, it does seem that he made a mistake between questions because it's in the law that everybody has this limit. I do think, however, this 25% tax-free lump sum could be a target for any future government to target to raise funds, not just Labour, which does raise a really interesting question. If we were to lose a 25% tax-free lump sum, what would that mean? And would opening a SIPP still be better than opening an ISA? I think this is a really interesting question to look at, so we can be prepared if it ever did happen. So let's take a look at what this would mean if this did happen and what we could do about it. In one of my most recent videos, I demonstrated the difference between an ISA and a SIPP, and the verdict was that even with the tax due, the SIPP was still the better account to go for financially, as it will give you more in the long run. You can check out that video if you want to see it in more detail. I'll link it at the end of the video, so don't worry. However, off the back of that, I wanted to create something more in depth, so I spent a day putting together an investment calculator to help you work out the difference for yourself based on how much you're actually investing. This is going to be part of my Retire Early roadmap I'm putting together. I'll link it down in the description down below, which is free to download. There will be some other things in there to help too, like investment flowcharts, the best accounts, and so on. I'm working on creating something as useful as possible to help people. What this will do is also help us answer the question of what happens if we lose the tax-free lump sum. So to start, we need to create ourselves a persona. So for our persona, let's choose somebody aged 30, and we'll say that they're going to invest £200 per month. Of course, you can adjust this with a spreadsheet, and I'll show you exactly how to do that now. So the first thing we've got at the top of the spreadsheet is 6 boxes. So first, you're going to put your current age. So here we'll go for 30 based on our persona, and then you can put the age that you're going to choose to retire at. So for this case, let's say he's going to retire at 60. Of course, you can take that from 57 at the moment up to 67 or whenever you choose to, but let's just take 60 as it gives us a nice round number of 30 years. Now I have created this feature here where you can put in your initial investment, but let's not add that for now. Then we've got this box here for inflation. Now for inflation, I've taken a 30-year average, which is 2.83%. You can choose to set this to 0 if you want to, but I would recommend just leaving it as it is. And I'll show you why that's important in just a minute. So then we'll put our investment per month. So as we said, we'll put £200 in there. Now below that, you've got the annual return rate. Now this is a bit up to you. What I would say as a nice average figure, go for something like 7%. I know a lot of people go off the S&P 500, which has done around 10% on average per year, but that is a little bit optimistic, and I'd rather verge on the safe side. Even something like a world fund is around 7 to 8%, but let's go for 7 just to be safe. Now what this will do down below is it will automatically generate some projections for you. And what's really smart about this is if I just show you, down here is our projections. So we've got a projection by age, so we've got a row for every single year. And then in the next column, we've got your investment amount post-tax. So this is within an ISA, so of course you're already going to have paid tax on that money. And what this is going to do is what's suggested is to increase your contributions with inflation. And the theory is as inflation goes up, our wages hopefully go up up to. So in an ideal world, to be investing the same amount of money, you should be increasing your contributions by inflation. So for example, it's £200, then 205, 211, and so on. Of course, you could come up here and set that to 0 if you just plan to keep the same amount, and that will give you £200 down the row entirely. But I would recommend just keeping it at 2.83% for now. And what that will do is it will dynamically add your return. So here it's +7. So that will show you if you invested £200 a month plus the return, how much you would end up by year. So that will give you a projection right down to the bottom at your retirement goal. So in this case, we've got £356,000 as your total you would receive. Now, the really clever thing about this is you can actually change your rows. So just as an example, if I planned to retire at 40, which, let's face it, we're not going to. But what that will do is actually shrink the rows down, so it will only show you rows for the years you have entered, which is really neat. So once you actually have a go at playing with this, what you'll be able to do is put your current age and retirement age. So for example, I could put 35 now, I plan to retire at 60, and that would give me a full projection of exactly where I would end up. But let's stick with our original numbers. What you could do, of course, here is if you do have some money at the moment, so say I was starting with £10,000, I could just pop it in there, and that will adjust all of our returns based on how much you have at the moment. But again, to keep it simple for now, let's just keep that to 0. So here are the figures that we've got. So that gives us a total for the ISA, which as we said was £356,000. Now we can do the same with the SIP. I'd like to take a minute to thank the sponsor of today's video for their ongoing support, InvestEngine. As most of you will know, InvestEngine are my favorite investing platform. I'm using them for my ISA, and I also have a tiny little SIP account with them, which I'm using to build up to maybe £1,000 using my TikTok income in a new challenge. But whether you invest in an ISA or after this video realize a SIP may be more beneficial for you, InvestEngine is a go-to platform I would recommend. With smart rebalancing features, a huge range of over 700 different ETFs to choose from, and a smart portfolio look-through tool which allows you to see how much you have invested in different stocks and countries while owning a single ETF, which is huge. They also have smart saving plans where you can automatically split your money into your chosen ETFs. I'd highly recommend them. They are who I use personally, which is great for me to recommend, and I will continue to use them into the future. I have a special link which will get you up to a £50 welcome bonus when you sign up at investengine.com/Chris Palmer. So I've created this column here for the SIP. Now the SIP calculation is a bit more complicated because it depends on what kind of money you're putting it into. Now by that, what I mean is it's whether it's money from the basic tax rate or the personal allowance, or it's from the higher end. Now, for the purpose of this video, we're going to ignore the personal allowance and kind of presume that you're going to use that for your day-to-day expenses, and that's going to go into that bracket. So what we're doing here is putting you in the basic rate. Now, what this means is if you were to pay into your SIP through things like salary sacrifice, you don't pay tax, and you also avoid national insurance. That's why it's so huge to do it that way. So you're actually getting much more going into your account. Now, there are a range of different national insurance brackets, which I'll pop on screen now, so it will depend which one you fall into. We're going to presume that the majority of us all fall into Class A. Especially if you're employed, this is pretty much the one you're going to fall into. So what we're accounting for here is 20% tax plus 8% national insurance. Now, of course, you don't pay full national insurance on some of that, you only pay it on a set amount. So in fact, from the first 0 to 242, you're not going to pay national insurance. It's only from 242 to 967 per week, which is really complicated to work. So for the purpose of this, we're going to use a flat 8%, and you can always up it and think, okay, I'm going to get a little bit more than this. So this gives you a really good baseline. So this time, as you can see, what this does is calculate. So from the original £200 you would have put into your ISA, you're going to get £277.71 going into your SIP, which is how much you would have had to earn to get that £200 in the first place. So it's quite shocking when you see it side by side like that. So this time when it compounds, instead of you getting 2,400, you're ending up with 3,400, which is quite a big difference. So that will run exactly the same calculations downwards. So at the end, you will see you end up with £495,000 opposed to £356,000. So when you look at it like that, the difference is quite shocking. I mean, there's pretty much £140,000 difference there. Now, I've also done the same calculation here for the higher rate payer. So if you paid into your pension directly from higher rate tax, this is where it gets quite scary, the difference. So this time, to actually get £200 in your pocket, you have to earn £478, because in that bracket, bracket, you're going to pay 2% national insurance on the income. Bearing in mind you've already paid the 8%, etc., like everybody else. So you've got 2%, but you're also paying 40% tax on that income, which is scary. So this time we're taking away 40% to get that £200. So this time it would be the equivalent of £478 going into your pension. So again, it runs the figures, and again we can see here from getting 2,400 in an ISA, you would actually get 5,900 in a SIP, which is crazy. But the end of that calculation gets you to £853,000 compared to £356,000 in an ISA, which is huge. Now, once we've actually got that figure, what we can do is come down here. So down here, we've got the calculator. So if this looks a little bit complicated, don't worry, it's actually really simple. So what we've got here is £356,000, as we've just seen. Now, we're going to estimate based on the 4% rule. So what this means, if you were to withdraw 4% per year, in an ideal world, that would last you 30 years. Some people say that's not perfect, but it's a really good indicator of what you could expect. So based on that, we would get £14,261 per year at 60. Now, of course, on that, we don't pay any tax and we don't pay any national insurance because it's in a tax-free wrapper. So we're left with £14,261 as income per year. Now, with a SIP, this is where it differs and we do have to pay tax. Now, with a SIP, we've got £495,000, which is much more. In fact, that's £138,000 more than we have in the ISA. Now, the tax-free lump sum would be 25%, which we would be able to withdraw £123,000 without paying any tax on it. Now, of course, as I explained, you can withdraw this over time, which is actually more efficient. But for the purpose of this video, let's say you didn't get that tax-free lump sum. So that with an estimated income would be £19,807. And the tax due on that amount per year would be £1,447, and your national insurance would be £577. Now, we should take into consideration here, which is also going to make this a little bit better. Once you hit state retirement age, you will stop paying national insurance. There are some circumstances where you will, so you won't even have to pay this as well, which makes it even better. So once you've paid them, let's just take into account that you will pay them anyway, especially if you're trying to retire early. You're going to be left with £17,782. Now, the difference versus an ISA is going to be £3,520 that you'll be better off per year, even without that tax-free lump sum. Now, if we look at the higher rate, which is actually even better, you're going to be left with £853,000, as we discussed. Now, the difference versus an ISA is actually £358,000, which is huge, so higher rate income is a no-brainer going into a pension. The tax-free lump sum is £213,000, of course we're ignoring that again. That would leave you with an income of £34,150. The tax due would be £4,316, national insurance £1,700. Again, you stop paying that when you hit the state pension age, and that would leave you with £28,000 per year. So compared to an ISA, that's actually £13,847, you'd be better off. So even with really basic calculations, you can see the SIP is going to be better than an ISA, even without the tax-free lump sum, which to some might be a shock. Now, of course, there's actually something else we need to take into consideration here, and that's the fact that most people will get a workplace pension. So what I've done for that is I've actually included a box for that too. Now, this will differ depending on who you work for. It's typically between 3 and 8%. Now, for ease, what I've done is put this in as a figure. So you can put in how much you'll be putting in as a figure. So let's say you're putting in £200 and your employer is going to match that and put £200 in too. Now, again, what this will do is increase it for inflation, because hopefully your wage will go up with inflation through pay rises and so on. Of course, you can choose to remove that if you'd prefer to do it without inflation. But what this will do is then adjust all of those figures. Now, this is where it gets quite crazy. So before, when you had the ISA was £356,000, the pension then goes to £851,000 in the basic rate, and the higher rate goes to £1.8 million, which is such a big difference. Now, if we come down to our figures, we can see in a basic rate, you're going to be £13,000 better off, and you're going to be left with £28,000 a year as opposed to £14,000. In the higher rate, you can get £52,000 with a £38,000 difference, which is scary how big the difference is. Now, what I would say, there is a catch here. The workplace pensions tend to always underperform the market, and they've got higher fees. So the best way to do this is if you take that figure, so let's remember £14,000. I'll just pop it down here, 14,261. So that's how much I would end up with a good return in an ISA doing it myself. So if I pop up here and I change this to 4 or 5%, let's go for let's go for 4%, just to say it's going to underperform the market by 3%, and we scroll back down. You can then see the difference. So even with the worst returns, you're going to be £4,000 better off with the basic rate, and in the higher rate, you're still going to be £20,000 better off, even getting a worse return. And of course, what we need to think about with these figures is we're not even including that tax-free lump sum. If we add that on as well, the SIP way outperforms the ISA. The only benefit, of course, with an ISA is the fact that it is more flexible and you can take it when you want. I'm still a big advocate that you should build up that account so you can use that before you get to the SIP age. That's really the best strategy you can use. But what you need to do before you even start thinking about that is make sure your SIP has got enough money in the first place so you can retire when you want with the right amount you want. There's no point really focusing on the ISA before you know your pension is going to be enough. We've had record numbers of young people opting out of the workplace pension now. 72,000 people more did it last year, which is a real shock. And I have so many people speak to me on a regular basis that just aren't going to have enough in their pension to get the right level of income that they want. So many people think the state pension is going to be enough, and I'm sure it still will be there, but in a worst case scenario, if it wasn't there and it was, say, means tested, you need to make sure you've got enough just in case that does happen. But at the same time, on the complete other side of the scale, you don't want to put all your money in a pension and then you're not enjoying your life now. So what I would really suggest, have a play around with this calculator, try and get an idea of how much you will end up with, and you can actually see how much you need to invest. For example, if I run these figures now, so if I pop this in with my age, so I'm 35 now, I want to retire at say 60, at the moment I've got £284,000. So just going off the ISA, which is not including the SIP, I invest at the moment, I think £2,000 a month, which is huge. And I'm getting around a 7% return per year. Even on the worst end, that should give me 3.9 billion, which I definitely don't need. So I can really go back to myself and say, actually, if I invest £300 per month, I'm still going to end up with 1.9 million, which will be plenty when I get to that age. Or maybe I want a little bit more than that. Maybe I up it and go for £300 per month. But then I know that's taken care of and I don't need to worry about it. And I can spend more time enjoying myself now, which is so important. If you haven't seen it already, I talk more about this in my hardest part about investing because it's such a crucial thing to talk about and not enough people do. So I really hope this video has been useful, and what I would say is if they do take away this 25% tax-free lump sum, it doesn't really matter because we're still going to be better off using the pension. So try not to worry, and hopefully this will give you some peace of mind. What I would say as well is I have put this note down here. Remember that money today isn't the same value in the X years time. What I mean by that is whatever the money is worth now and you think your projections are going to be, probably going to need more than that in the future than you actually think. So what I would say is kind of overestimate what you think you will need to make sure you've got enough. If you think you can live off £20,000 a day, you'll probably need at least £30,000 in 30 years time at a minimum. So just overestimate it and hopefully you'll be fine. If you want to see the SIP versus ISA in more detail and the pros and cons, you may want to check out this video, or this video also might help you. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you over there.